And right now I'd like to welcome everyone to Borough Hall, Brooklyn Borough Hall, your home. On behalf of Borough President Eric Adams, my name is Diane and I'm the Deputy Brooklyn Borough President. I'm presiding over this hearing for opening remarks. I've been joined by our Policy Director, Ryan Lynch, and the staff of Borough Hall is circling around. Anthony Drummond, as part of the unit of the policy at Brooklyn Borough Hall, is perhaps the person that you've been listening to and hearing from. So we'd like to just thank him for all his efforts, and the staff of what would be the Chief Program Officer, Candice, Julian, and Mike, who are here as well, and Jesse. So this is our team here, and Joe, who is videotaping this for our YouTube channel, One Brooklyn. So this will be aired and at all time accessible for people to listen to this as often as they need to. This is a great opportunity for us to convene people, the public of Brooklyn, families, to be able to share their challenges financially. We have been joined by despite busy schedules, trying to make sure that we get our elected representatives, and we're very privileged to have Senator Diane Savino with us here today. Senator Velma Montgomery should be on her way. I don't know if there's a representative in the room right now. Welcome to join us here if there is, but she should be arriving shortly as well. And we have our financial advisor, Patrick Gilbride.
Yes.
And he is from Edward Jones Investment, who is co-sponsoring this hearing with us. And we're excited to be able to have experts sitting here along with us to be able to hear firsthand some of those challenges. We'd like to also thank our list of partners that have participated here today. The Brooklyn Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Valley National Bank, Municipal Credit Union, MCU, Citibank, New York Community Bank, Santander, Northfield Bank, Bank of America, Amalgamated Bank, and Brooklyn Cooperative Federal Credit Union. If I've forgotten any of them, I apologize. Certainly let me know as we move along. But I do want to just share that those particular banks are present in our rotunda, and they are ready to give you any assistance you need, and not limited to just personal. If you are a small business owner as well, feel free to get as much information as you need. I'd like to thank everyone again for coming to this Financial Health of Brooklyn hearing, but more importantly to hear directly from you in terms of your financial health. 17% of Brooklynites carry a debt that is 90 days past due, and the overall debt levels of Brooklyn residents surpass that of New York City. It is important that we begin to address this issue early on, as this is a critical and important topic that affects everyone here in Brooklyn. Whether it is educating yourself on what a FICO score is, or means, or how it impacts you, to understanding what debt-income ratio means to you and your financial stability. Purchasing a car or buying a home. There's nothing that is exclusive to this conversation. We need to start understanding how financing works, especially when it comes to managing your own personal finances. And I want to just thank everyone for coming here this evening. In my days as a council member, we had many forums concerning financial literacy and empowering people in understanding what they needed to do, because everyone was eager to buy a home, right? The American dream, as they say. And shortly, development occurs on a daily basis, and the Affordable Homes was a subsidized program where many families, or the Nehemiah homes, were two-family homes that were being built throughout the borough. And it was important for people not to wait for the brick and mortar to be seen, but rather years in advance prepare to be credit worthy and loan ready to be able to carry such a debt. And one of the challenges was maintaining what would be good credit once they heard a participant through the lottery system of being the lucky winner of an application approved for a home and just waiting. That waiting period was the hardest because they wanted to buy a new home right away and purchase new furniture. And that's a no-no. We have to make sure that we reach milestones in our borough. We carry what would be in this borough 2% higher than the national debt, and we want to reach the goal in 4 years to lower that so that we can be below the national debt. And we will continue to make those efforts together by educating the public of and our residents and families of Brooklyn. And we're not limiting that to only adults, our elders, but also children. We want them to understand the difference and understand how to be smart and ready to manage their finances. And with that, I'd like to just take this moment to ask Senator Savino to just welcome you all.
Thank you, Deputy Borough President Reyna. It's a pleasure to be with you. I don't get to see you that often anymore, but it really is a pleasure to see you. And I want to thank, of course, our Borough President, Eric Adams, for hosting this very important hearing, and to my colleague who will be here, Senator Montgomery, and to Mr. Gilbride, and to Ryan Lynch, and everyone who attended tonight. It's a very complex, important issue. I now chair the Senate Banking Committee. I've been in the Senate 10 years now, and I can remember shortly after I got elected in 2005, we started to see the end of that year, the beginning of what came to be known as the subprime lending crisis, where we started to hear from constituents in our districts that were facing challenges with their mortgages, with homes that they had purchased that they suddenly found. I don't know why this is running. I don't know what this is doing. People who had suddenly found that a home that they had purchased that appeared affordable at the time was no longer affordable. They were being notified by their lending institutions that their mortgage rates were going up, that their payments were doubling sometimes, that there were these things called balloon payments and, you know, all kinds of changes, and they didn't understand any of it. And I liken applying for a mortgage or getting a mortgage. It's kind of like walking into the middle of a movie where everybody knows what's happening but you. It is one of the most scary things any of us have ever done. I still remember the first time I bought a house. You really don't know any of the things that they're talking about at a house closing. How many of you have gone to a house closing? And so you know. And you sign page after page after page after page, and they tell you don't look at that last page that tells you how much this loan's really going to cost you over the life. It just scares the hell out of you. And most of the time we're intimidated. And we don't want to ask the hard questions because we don't want to appear that we don't know what we're talking about, and we are afraid that we're going to look silly, and so we go along with it. And there were millions of Americans who went along with bad loans at the middle of the last century. And those bad loans then led to the complete meltdown of our economy. And these are very complicated things, and we don't expect average citizens to understand the financial markets or subprime loans, et cetera, but they need to basically understand their own finances. And what we found during that period of time as we tried to figure out how to help people restructure their loans, how to go after the banking industry, how to create opportunities for people to be able to keep their homes, we also found out that many of the people didn't understand the basic rules. And so we realized that financial literacy was critically important for average citizens. And so we've set out a couple of ways to try and accomplish financial literacy for average citizens. There are financial literacy programs that are now available through every library. How many people know that? That's good, you know it. Most people don't. We have passed legislation in the Senate and the Assembly, and the governor has signed it into law to create financial literacy training in our high schools. The Board of Regents can require that a financial literacy program be taught. They're required to teach economics, but it's up to them to decide what economics means. We believe in the legislature that that economics course and that credit requirement could be met better by a financial literacy program for teenagers in school than some of the other training. We haven't won that fight yet, but I think that's something that we should be pushing more on. I know that We have also recently created a financial literacy program that would require that the summer youth employment program include financial literacy education for all youth that are attending. It's wonderful that kids get a job through the summer youth employment program, and they get paid. They need to know how to handle that paycheck, though, and most of us don't. I remember when I was young, my grandmother always taught me that when you get paid, you set aside 1/3 of your paycheck for rent, 1/3 for, everything else, and then the rest of it is yours to play with. Well, we all know that rent costs a lot more than 1/3 of your paycheck now. But that was the extent of financial literacy training I received in my life. And that was long before credit cards, and long before mortgages, and long before subprime lending, and long before a lot of the things that young people are introduced to now. So we need to do more with our training and our teaching of our young people. One of the other things that we're focusing on now in the Senate, now that we've tackled the issue of subprime lending in the home industry, in the mortgage industry, we drove a lot of bad actors out of the subprime lending industry. We drove them out of the mortgage industry entirely. We required mortgage brokers in New York State to become licensed. And that, in and of itself, sent a lot of people out of the industry because they couldn't get a license, because many of them had criminal records, many of them had been convicted of fraud in some other lending scheme. So they got pushed out. But bad actors don't go away. They just figure out other ways to rip people off. And so now what we're seeing is many of the people that we drove out of the subprime lending industry and the mortgage business have gotten involved in subprime lending in used cars. And they are ripping people off every day. We did a hearing a few months ago in the Senate. We've introduced several pieces of legislation. Some of them have been passed already. We're going to continue working on that. How do we protect people from predatory lending? Well, there's two ways to do it: good legislation and financial literacy. And that's what tonight's hearing is about. How do we provide average people with the tools that they need to be able to make good financial decisions? And then we'll handle the bad guys when we catch them doing that.
Thank you, Senator Savino. And, the committee, the Banking Committee, State Committee, is where, if you don't know, where you would have filed complaints with the State Banking Department. And so her position is very powerful. And when you feel like you have nowhere else to go to get answers, it is Senator Savino's committee that would look into what would be these rising rates of predatory lending and issues that are very complicated. And when the masses are continuously coming to the committee, then she starts seeing a pattern. And that pattern tells her a story, and then, and only then, can she be effective in dealing with what are the new trends coming in. There's also reverse mortgages. As an elder, and estate planning is becoming very important, more so today than ever before. Bedford Stuyvesant has one of the richest real estate properties, and when you talk about a brownstone, maintaining a brownstone on a fixed income, you have no home because you have no ability to maintain that home, and yet you're sitting on millions because the property is worth that much and you have nothing for it. And so reverse mortgage is another way where if you're an elder and you have no concept of what that means, you sign off your property and someone can take it right underneath you, title and all. And so we have to get smarter. As Senator Savino said, financial literacy in every aspect is more so important today than ever before because it takes on a new mask every day. Thank you very much. And now I would like to just ask our financial advisor here tonight to introduce himself, Patrick Gilbride.
Thank you very much,
From Edward
Deputy
Jones.
President, and Senator Savino, thanks for those comments. I appreciate being able to be here, and I want to extend my thanks to the Borough President himself. As I gave some thought to what we would be talking about tonight on the way here and earlier, I kept on returning to the same word, and it's education, right? So I broke that down in my mind and I thought about education, and what I came up with is there's maybe 4 places that people can expect to become educated about finances. And of course it starts with parents. It continues in the schools, something we have a lot less control over and might not be contributing as positively as the media, of course. We like to see good portrayals of financial professionals, but we seem to end up with, you know, The Wolf of Wall Street and all these other movies. Make a lot of money, but they don't really teach you a whole lot about the reality of the way that finance works. And finally, I started to think more about those financial professionals like myself. I maintain an Edward Jones branch office. Just a quick bit about that so you understand the context. Edward Jones is a 92-year-old investment advisory firm. It's organized as a private partnership. It has almost 14,000 branches in all 50 states and in Canada. And really what we do is we sit down with individuals who are looking to, you know, save money, to grow their wealth, preserve it, and pass it on. We have 7 million people right now that we're helping with that. And when you get past all those facts and figures and you think about what does that actually look like, what it really looks like is a bit of education going on. When I sit down in my office with people every single week, couples and individuals by themselves who are just looking to figure out, how do I make sure that I'm going to be able to pay my bills in retirement? You know, my company has trained me and it encourages me to break it down, right? To explain how the markets work, what are the important little things that you can do to ensure that your money does in fact grow, that it is being protected, and that you can count on some kind of income after you don't go out to work every morning, get on the subway and go to a job. So I think we have, as financial professionals, an enormous amount of responsibility and a terrific opportunity, whether we work at a firm like mine or we're at a bank or we do mortgages. That's where the rubber meets the road, right? Where individuals are sitting down and saying to somebody, hey, I need to try to accomplish something here with my finances. What can you tell me about the right way to do it? We have to constantly keep the pressure on people who are in positions like I am to do the right thing. And that comes from legislation, regulation, which is a dirty word in my industry. A lot of the folks that, you know, I work with or have worked with over the years are very vehemently against any kind of regulation. I don't think that that's a really good idea or good position to have, because we want smart regulation, right? And you folks know probably, I'm sure, better even than I do, how good intentions for legislation that will actually prove helpful to the, you know, to the populace or to the people out there can sometimes have unintended consequences. But I know you do a lot of hard work to try to avoid that. So regulation is okay. We then have to make sure that as individuals, when we do sit down with somebody, understand that you can expect them to disclose costs and risks and alternative solutions that you might not be told about right away. Expect that. You know, hold their feet to the fire, as they say, and ask questions. I've got a stack of brochures in my office that I give out all the time from the SEC, and that's exactly the title on the front. It says, Ask Questions. It was published by the federal government to get out there into the public and to encourage people to, you know, if something seems too good to be true, ask a question, because it probably is. All right? Going back to education as well, I know that maybe at the state Senate level or here in the Borough President's office, you may have some influence over the, you know, the school system to try to do things like you were describing, Senator Savino, that will force education into the curriculum that has everything in the world to do with finances and how people can make good decisions. But really, I'm just here to say today that know that you are in charge. When you sit down with an advisor like myself or a banker or a mortgage broker, you're the boss, right? We want your business, obviously, but you deserve to be treated as the person who's really calling the shots. It's your future, it's your decision to make. Ask them as many questions as you want and be patient with yourself and with them so that you come out the end of those meetings that you might have feeling like you truly understand what decisions you have in front of you and what options there are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those particular points. And Keep in mind, these hearings are going to be dedicated to creating an ecosystem of financial health for our borough. And we need your assistance and cooperation, and it takes one to know one, right? So any information you gather here, we'd love for you to pass it on. And we learn from your experience as you will from ours as we continue to go through the borough and listen to these stories. I'd like to now ask, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to begin this hearing? Because this is about listening to you, the public. And just stand up and go to the mic, introduce yourself, name, area, community area, and story.
Hello. Hi. My name is Jamil DeBay, and I'm a Brooklynite, but I'm currently residing in Staten Island. And some of the things that seem to be very obvious to lay people it poses questions to us, like the banks, for instance. The fees that are tacked on to, say, your checking account, okay? First of all, they're taking your money and using it, you know, and at the interest rates of today, like 1%, you're not making any money on your money that they're holding for you. So the bank fees that they tack on to your accounts seem to be exorbitant. Also, back in the day, when you had a credit card and you met your limit, the card was rejected, okay? Now the banks, they compound these fees if they extend you money to cover whatever it is that you're going overdraft, and then they have these $34, $35 overdraft fees. That shouldn't be. I think Obama put something in legislation to address that. That's my first question. What can we do about these bank fees that
Very
the
interesting.
bankers impose on us?
It's a very interesting question. Understanding that there are what they call state banks and federal banks. Why would you want to be a federal bank? Right? You want to be a federal bank because federal regulations are a lot more lenient towards the banking industry than states are. I think there's only one state chartered bank left in the state of New York, the Bank of New York. Every other bank that you deal with here is a federally chartered bank. That's why the address for all of these banks is either in Delaware or what's the other state?
That's the one that I'm
Yeah,
aware of.
Delaware is the biggest one.
What is Valley National Bank?
They're all federally chartered banks. And what that means is that we have a limited oversight. We can't make them do. With respect to the fees that banks charge for managing accounts, their argument is it costs money to maintain money. And that if you have less than a certain amount of money in your account, that it costs them more money. So if you have less than $200 in your account, you're going to pay a fee. If you have more than, most banks set a limit of like $1,000. If you maintain $1,000 all month long, banking is free, right? Checks are free, banking fees are free. So it's their way of having you keep your money in the bank. There's been attempts by many legislators, both on the state level and on the federal level, to change that, to eliminate banking fees. They have not been successful. And as I said, because most banks are federally chartered, only Congress can fix this. On the issue of credit cards or overdraft fees, that, quite frankly, is a tool that banks use, and that's why financial literacy is so important. Right, but think about this. Financial literacy is so important because you know how much money you have. And if you don't have enough money in your checking account, you shouldn't be writing a check against money that isn't there. So if you do, it's kind of like a credit card, right? Or a charge card almost. You got to pay interest on that. The interest is exorbitant though, which is why people really should not use it. They should not use their overdraft fee. It should be only for an emergency. But they're not thinking that way. They think, well, the bank says I can do this, and they'll just charge me a fee. It's like if you don't pay your American Express card on time every month, you get hit with a $35 charge.
But if you call the bank and tell them that you don't want them to cover your overdraft, just reject the fee, just reject the charge? then they'll do that, and then you don't get a fee.
Right, so if you don't overdraft, if you don't overdraw your account, I mean, obviously mistakes happen. Sometimes someone will write you a check and that check will bounce, but.
Sometimes the check is in transit and it's floating.
Yes.
And it takes like 5 business days or 3 business days, whatever it is. So it hasn't hit your account, and that's
Right,
the
but
exact time
I think-
that they hit you with the fee.
I think Patrick said it best. Sometimes things sound too good to be true, and if they do, they are. So if you know how much money you have in the bank, if you write a check against money that doesn't exist, you're going to have to pay interest on it. And the interest on that, unfortunately, is exorbitant in some respects. It's not worth the extension of that money. And I think part of the financial literacy experience is starting to recognize what's a good and bad financial decision for yourself.
And I'd like to just ask for your slip. You filled it out?
Just need
A pen, of course.
I mean,
So if anyone needs a pen, please raise your hand because we will be happy to provide one for you. And I just wanted to make sure, part of this financial hearing is to understand some housekeeping rules. So what was just engaged, I allowed, but I shouldn't have, right? Because we want to hear from everyone. And we have a limited time. If you notice, there's a 3-minute clock, so that every person who's speaking has the opportunity to speak within 3 minutes. We are taking down notation, so if it becomes a conversation, then that will never be recorded. We have Sarah, who's our paralegal intern, and Sarah is trying her best to make sure she's keeping up with a lot of what's being said, because at the end of this hearing series, there's going to be a report published, and recommendations are going to be proposed on behalf of the Borough President and Senator Savino and our financial advisor as a expert in the financial sector. And so we want to make sure that we have tight time slots for each individual. So if I can ask the next individual, if you have your comments prepared and you'd like to share them, please come up to the mic and hand over the slip so that way we have a record of it.
The other thing, one thing I would like to point out, though, you can find out how much a bank charges in fees. Every bank has a website. The New York State Department of Financial Services also includes that information. If you don't want to pay fees to a bank, don't go to that bank. Community banks charge lower fees. I think credit unions don't charge any fees. And quite frankly, credit unions are probably the best place for people with limited financial resources to begin to put their money. As a plug for the credit unions. It's true.
Thank you very much, Senator. And we are joined by mainstream banks as well as federal credit unions. That's why we want to make sure that we are empowering each individual here with information to allow them to understand the differences, right? We want you to shop around for what fits you best. And how do you know what fits you best unless you ask? And so going back to what Patrick is saying, we're gonna quote you all night, it's important to ask. Full disclosure is your protection, and you have every right to ask. And so there is no silly question out there for the sake of the children who are here. I wanted to just share, it's important that you ask, because the question you don't ask is probably the one that was most important. So I'd like to ask Ryan. These are the slips, and we have 2 slips here. We're going to ask Barbara Victome. Did I say that right? Victome. I was going to say Victome first. Executive Director of Haki Ietu. Fantastic. Of Flatbush.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Like you said, I'm from Haki Ietu, and it means our rights. It's a Swahili word. And I'm also part of the foreign-born population living in Brooklyn, Caribbean, as you know. So one of the things that we're doing at Haki Ietu is financial empowerment, primarily for women. And what we're finding out is that the whole concept of financial literacy empowerment is so foreign. especially when we're talking about non-English speaking immigrants. And people who, whose cultures don't really allow them, especially women who have been in submissive position and that don't really understand what financial freedom is really about. So my question is, what are some of the efforts that are being made to ensure that the financial literacy programs that you talked about are addressing the cultural and linguistic needs of immigrants? Because what we do, we work primarily with churches. We go into the churches and we facilitate these trainings. And a lot of these people have never even heard about this financial literacy program that you mentioned today.
Well, again, we have required through the State Department of Education that every high school do an economics course, which can include financial literacy. We couldn't mandate that it has to be financial literacy, although I think we should try. There are programs available in our libraries now that the state is paying for. Financial literacy is available there. Through, as I said, the Summer Youth Employment Program. There's a bill that will be sitting on the governor's desk very soon that will allow women who are on public assistance to take a financial literacy course, and that would count towards their work experience requirement, because we realize that we want people to be able to manage their finances if they happen to actually get a job. But absolutely, we could do more. Working with some of our banks, I think we need to get them to help participate with providing financial literacy in languages that people can understand, because as we know, cultural competency is critically important in all aspects, but especially here. If people have a language barrier, they're not going to be able to understand financial literacy, so we need to kind of close that gap. We can do that working together. I'm very concerned lately about, financial abuse of seniors. Mm-hmm. It is a growing problem that we are all struggling with how to deal when many of these seniors are victimized by their own family members. Mm-hmm. How do we reach them? And organizations like yours are going to be incredibly helpful to us to reach out to people who won't necessarily call the senator's office, but they'll call you.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I just wanted to add to that, partnering with what would be one of the banks here present, to ask them, could you come and provide a financial education forum for my constituency? Because at your organization, Haki Yetu, your constituents trust you. Mm-hmm. And so because you are advertising to give financial literacy and education and empowering them with information, can they then absorb that information just 1 degree closer to trusting a system that they are very intimidated by? And so, that is something that we want to encourage, and if you need assistance in organizing that, by all means, contact us, because we would be happy to facilitate that. And I'm sure that we have our financial institutions here who are more than willing to participate in such a forum. Thank you. Excellent comment. Elizabeth Malone from Neighborhood Housing Services of East Flatbush, and I don't know if Haki Yetu has met with NHS of Flatbush, but that's an important contact right there, because I know I've worked with NHS for homeownership seminars and preparing what would be families to own a home one day, and financial literacy is an important component of that, and they provide that free of charge to many families, and partnering with organizations like yours is also another alternative.
Elizabeth,
thank you for being here.
May I just wanted to make a quick suggestion. You mentioned the churches that you work with. I would encourage you to get in touch with the pastor at the church or whomever is kind of in charge, and ask them to bring in financial professionals like bankers and brokers and so on, to do classes or seminars or workshops aimed at sharing that information. And if they do it in that forum, you might even have a built-in interpreter. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the support and the promo for NHS. Yes, home ownership, creating and preserving home ownership is a core mission of NHS, but we start with people wherever they are in this journey, and that includes people who are just beginning their financial life or who are nowhere near ready to buy. We work long-term with people, which is one reason why I was very glad to hear that the Borough President considers this a long-term commitment, that you've got a 4-year goal going on here. Because one of the things that we have discovered doing this for the last 30 years is that while information is absolutely crucial, and certainly the younger the better, obviously our college debt situation is dire. It is the largest amount of consumer debt that this country has ever seen. And when I graduated from college, I had $5,000 in debt. My daughter's looking at 40. All right, that's just tremendously issued. But at any rate, education and information is utterly, utterly crucial. But the most interesting financial class I ever was involved with, half of the people in it had already been through financial literacy. What had not happened for them was changing their financial behavior. And this is something that I think that the Borough President's office and other electeds can help support, because what we do find changes behavior is peer-to-peer support, so that people come in not only for a series of information classes, but then can come together for peer group support to check in on where they are on their goals, to check in on where they are on their behaviors. Did you read your bank statement this month? I mean, we start with people who we need to help you open your mail. Okay, literally, we've done that with foreclosure, in foreclosure prevention. And what have been your successes? You hardly ever see a commercial praising somebody who didn't buy the purse. Okay, and what have been your challenges? This kind of financial change is a lonely, lonely business, especially when you've got static incomes, stagnant economies, where people are not financially getting ahead, and it just seems like an endless, lonely treadmill. So I think that the Borough President, as this is a 4-year commitment, can commit to doing this kind of innovative peer group support to help people come together and share the information. New Yorkers are incredibly smart. Okay? When you get a group of people, New Yorkers, together and they start sharing about what they bought and how they're financing something or what they're paying for something, you find an incredible wealth of information. Okay? And this is the kind of thing that can help people get to those goals, because changing behavior is really where you need a friend. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to just express, we mentioned how there was 17% of all Brooklynites carry a debt that is 90 days past due in my earlier comments. And if you calculate 17% of our total population, 2.6 million people, we should have had at least 500,000 people in this room, right? It's a lot of individuals. And it was well said through NHS how they start off with what would be just at the mere fact of opening mail that has been just piling up, because the easiest thing to do is ignore the pile that's growing. And it's very difficult to do it alone. And so you're not alone is the message, and get the help early rather than later. Look for the resources that are free, that are out there, because they are there. And that's one of the major points that the Borough President wants to really drive home, is the fact that we're leaving resources at the table. We are not connecting people to the resources they need. And if it's there, we have to make sure they know it's there, and put it right in front of them so that they understand there's an answer. And so, is there another individual who would like to this evening share what would be their recommendation, their testimony in relationship to this particular hearing. We have Denise Garrett, Financial Counselor of LDCE NY. LDC, it's the Local Development Center of East New York.
Local Development
Corporation of East New York.
Senator Savino, I get your newsletter all the time.
If you can just raise your mic.
Oh,
Where do you live?
I live in Coney Island.
Wow, excellent.
Yes, I have stories of flood disasters,
Oh.
but we won't talk about that tonight. In terms of seniors, the local, excuse me. Okay, let me be calm. I was excited to see you. In terms of seniors, my organization actually have created a financial workshop to educate seniors on financial scams that are targeted at them directly. So that's one way we are helping the seniors to deal with not just the scams, but also to guide them in the direction of safe investment vehicles for seniors. I also did place on my list student loans. Now, I have a particular problem with Sallie Mae and maybe the government in general. Oh, really? And I think I speak loud. Okay. Okay. Student loans. I have tried with some of my clients who have come to me regarding credit issues. And a lot of the credit issues that I see, a great percentage of it has to do with delinquent student loans. And I'd like to see the government force Sallie Mae to allow students to refinance those huge debts. Student loans now run between 3.5% to about 8.5%. And because the interest rates now have been at record lows, if the students are allowed to refinance those student loans, their payments would go down and we would have less delinquencies.
You are 100% right. It is the subject of, I believe it's going to be one of the major issues in the upcoming presidential campaign. You will hear from any serious presidential contender that this is an issue that we have to tackle.
Yeah.
The amount of debt that our young people are carrying now, I don't care what we teach them. Patrick could sit down with them tomorrow and try and refine and help them. They will never get ahead.
Right.
They will be paying these loans off till they die. Some of them are bigger than the mortgage on my house.
Yeah, it's true.
And there is no way they're going to get out from underneath them. There are some who believe that what we need to do is we need to wipe out student loan debt entirely, that the federal government should absorb it.
Oh, well, I'm not
You know,
for that. But
I don't think that's going to happen, but there's got to be a restructuring of this debt. Otherwise, we are going to cripple an entire generation of young people.
and it affects the parents who co-sign,
Absolutely.
and they can't actually fund their
Absolutely.
retirements. It's a
Right.
monster.
Which is why I go back to the requirement that we need to make the Department of Education change they should require financial literacy of young people. That should be the economics credit that they get in school. They should teach them why you should or shouldn't take on student loan debt. Many kids are taking on debt that they don't need.
Yes.
They're doing it because basically the federal government is giving away
Yes.
money, in essence, by
That's true.
underwriting the cost of the loans. They don't do that in any other aspect. And so we're encouraging young people to take on debt. Correspondingly, universities are raising tuition, and
Yes.
why not? Because people are getting access to
Yes.
money. There's no reason why you shouldn't raise the tuition. So we have to get in front of this.
Now, locally, I only know of one college that actually has financial literacy in the curriculum, and that's Brooklyn College. And I believe that the local universities could help tremendously in that area.
We need
So-
them in high schools, though.
Well, yeah. Well, there's Council on Economic Education actually have a curriculum that teaches financial literacy for 6th grade to 12th grade. But you have to get certified for that.
Right.
I have the certification, so I work with some schools, but I believe it should be more widely available, especially the high schools.
Right. You're right, because in the high schools, it's optional.
Yes.
We should make it mandatory.
Mandatory, absolutely. Thank you.
Well,
It is mandatory in 3 states.
yes, and we're not one of them.
That's right. It's only 3 states.
I know.
Yeah.
Good.
May I?
Yes.
If I can. So, you know, from my point of view, in my world, when I sit down with people and we're coming up with a plan, you know, for them to reach their financial goals, I always point out to them that, you know, if they're paying a loan that they're paying, say, 7% on, paying that loan off is kind of like getting a guaranteed 7% return to yourself. Now, I can make people money and keep the risk down, but a guaranteed 7% return is kind of difficult. So I kind of guide them to try to get rid of that debt first, because that's really, you know, it's a really good investment for you. You're going to save yourself 7% on whatever you bring the principal down by. And I think I'd just like to make a comment that I understand that there's a movement to try to counsel students who are taking loans to match the amount that they borrow with the studies that they're taking, right? So there are certain jobs that have an amount of income you can expect from in that field. You should probably want to borrow something that measures up to that and doesn't go well beyond it. You know, you don't want to borrow, you know, nuclear physicist money, you know, when you're taking a course in something that's not likely to pay you as much. So I think that would help, and I don't know where we are on that, but it seems like a good idea to me.
It does sound like a good idea.
Thanks.
Credit cards are just as bad for young people.
Yeah, well, they're even
Great.
more expensive than student loans.
Great, thank you. Moving along, we wanted to bring up Dorla Eileen. Eileen, sorry if I mispronounced that.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Dorla Aline. I live in Clinton Hill here, and I'm a retired nurse now by virtue of an injury. I was a volunteer for Neighborhood Housing Services 30 years ago, and as a result, I learned about the loans under Dr. Fran Justa, and have been working with senior citizens on my own, helping them to get loans. One of the problems I'm finding now is that a number of them have been receiving calls from people at the bank telling them, oh, you know, your account has not been active and we're wondering what's been happening with you. I don't know how the government could go about checking on that. It's as though they're trying to see if the people are confused or what. The person says they're from the bank where they have their accounts, and they're testing their mental status. I don't know what that is leading up to, but there, you know, there needs to be something to be checked there. I came deliberately to share that type of information with you, where they're calling clients, elderly clients whose accounts have been inactive. They have no reason to make withdrawals because they can live off other investments. So I don't know what that is, what that would mean for you at this time.
I don't know, is there anybody from the banking industry that might be able to explain that practice?
Well, we have two banking experts here. Why do they do that?
The account is inactive, it goes into dormancy.
Can you stand, I'm sorry, can you stand up and speak into the microphone?
Well, just explain. So so we want to make sure people can hear.
We want to
your
make sure that
answer.
we're getting it on record understanding.
If there's inactivity in the account, it goes into dormancy, and once it goes into dormancy, it gets sheeted to the states.
I think he said if there's no activity on the account, how long? 12 months? So if there's no activity on account for more than 12 months, it goes into dormancy status. And if it goes into dormancy status, at what point does it get handed off to the state, to the unclaimed funds? Excuse me? 5 years? Okay. So any of you ever seen the unclaimed funds? You know, you can go online.
I help people with that. I go in and look for all the people
So,
I know name and
I think,
let them know.
that's the explanation that the banking people are offering. They want to make sure that they're not dormant accounts. Yes?
Every single client before the account goes dormant status, ahead of time, I believe it's 60 days, receiving a letter from the bank that the account is going to hit the dormant date, business day. So asking them to come to the bank to make any type of transaction. It can be deposit, it can be any kind of transaction.
But what would a senior do? I'm assuming you're talking to some seniors who are homebound, who have difficulty getting to and from the bank. If they haven't been to the bank, maybe they don't need the money, but what would they do? So if she's going to advise somebody, how should they respond? And also I want to make sure they're not being called by someone who really isn't from the bank.
Huh?
But they
That's
are
good to know.
receiving the letter about those fees, about that they do on the dormant status.
Mhm.
So it's really important for clients to come to the bank, see the banker, see the teller, and do something about it. Once you make a deposit, it goes live. It needs to be transaction by a teller. It's processed and show on the statement that it's 50 cents deposit or 50 cents withdrawal.
Could you do it on, by phone? Transfer money by phone? No? Okay.
Your pen.
And once they hit already the first charge of the dormant status of $12, you come to the bank, let's say you're traveling, you're not home, and the letter comes, you don't see the letter, and then you realize that you have the letter already with some charge for dormant status. Please don't hesitate, take the letter, not panic, go to your bank representative, go to your bank, explain the situation, and you can refund the $12, make the transactions, and then it goes back.
The cases that I'm speaking of, now is the first time I'm hearing about a letter. None of them received that. So that is why they got very suspicious, you know, as to who is checking on them. Is it that they want to transfer their monies to some other account or something else? So thank you very much for that explanation. My second concern has to do with when people have a settlement, a court settlement. Is the bank required to educate them as to the many ways of investing that money? And I'm saying that because there is, and what can be done. I witnessed a situation at a bank where someone came with a check for $6.5 million. The gentleman, one of the gentlemen at the bank, told them to open a savings account. The banking investment section went over to say to him, why didn't you send him? His response was, and I heard this, the manager told him it must go in a checking account so that she can get her bonus. The fellow at the investment section did send a letter in to complain about the situation.
Good.
So I just wanted to know if there is an entry for $6.5 million, who is monitoring to see why it went to a savings account or, you know, large sums? I'm not talking about $2. Is there some reporting system that goes in there?
What I'd like to suggest, I think the banker raised his hand before I grabbed the mic, so I'd like him to explain if he doesn't mind. Please.
No, definitely the bank would like to invest that money rather than keep it in the savings account. I don't know why the manager said we wanted a checking account to make a bonus when the bank or any financial institution makes more money doing an investment. First of all. But in many cases of the court settlement, there's a lot of times the attorneys get involved and they do a structured settlement with their own CPAs, and the money gets invested actually even before it comes to the bank. So, yeah, I would love it if an attorney just said, here, here's my client, but that usually never happens.
No. Good point.
I think the point that I'm taking from your comment is well taken. It's when $6.5 million ends up in the bank, you can bet the way they're structured now that somebody whose responsibility is with the investment component of most banks now, they're going to make that phone call, right? Because that's how they get paid. So I'm sure that anybody who's in that situation, it won't be probably too long a period of time before an investment advisor at the bank calls them to say, here are some options for you. And obviously the comment about shopping around always applies. So they'll get that call, and then they should obviously go and see at least 2, 3, 4 other people and work with the one that they feel they got the most information from and that they feel most comfortable with.
Great, thank you. Thank you for all the comments. I appreciate it. Moving right along, I want to bring up Evelyn Pugh.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Evelyn Pugh from Brooklyn. I'm working with Brooklyn UFT Parent Committee. We was planning a workshop on financial literacy. So I received that information already in the bag. So I came here today to find out about free course, person to come out to help me with the workshop. So I received that information. That was my first question. The second question I have is, once a person already have in debt and they're making payments or with the bank or credit cards, now they're starting to call people and harass them about trying to get the money, calling other family members, maybe somebody in Florida or someone, down south somewhere, where they don't even speak to them or know them, but because they know that they're a family member and they're calling them on the phone to try to get them to maybe speed up the debt, to pay the debt off or what have you. My question is that illegal, or is there anything you can do to, for the person to kind of cut that off?
It's not legal for them to do that, but I'm curious as to who is this debt that has been assigned to a collection agency, or is it the original debtor? Is it the original debt? Is it the credit card company? Is it the charge account? Or
well, when they're calling the other person, you don't really know who it is.
They're supposed to tell you who they are.
If somebody called your father, he's in Florida, about your debt, you don't really know if it's coming from...
That's illegal.
You don't know if it's coming from the debtor or who. Now, the person they're calling, even though they may be your father, you ain't talked to them in 20 years, you don't even communicate, but yet they're giving them your information for your phone number.
Those practices are illegal. They are not supposed to do that. But those aggressive debt collection practices are usually done by credit agents or debt collection agencies. And we, in fact, recently, the State Department of Financial Services under Ben Lawsky entered into an agreement with many of the debt collectors to cease and desist these practices. There's a whole section of the Supreme Court now that oversees these cases. The Attorney General's office has gotten involved in it. And so if you have situations like that, you should notify your local elected official. We can get the complaint to the Attorney General's office or to DFS, because these practices are not legal. They're not supposed to do this. But they do. There's no doubt. In fact, there's an article in today's news about a settlement against Time Warner Cable in Texas, where they were calling this, they called this woman 153 times for someone else's debt. They called her in the middle of the night, they called her at 8 in the morning, and they got hit with a $1,500 fine for all 153 violations. Now, that's an extreme case, but if you don't pursue it, though, they'll get away with it. And many of these debt collectors are very aggressive. They'll send you a letter saying that, there's a judgment against you, and come in and pay off half of it, and meanwhile, they have no judgment against you. So when you find yourself or anyone you know that feels that they're being victimized by this, the best thing to do is call one of us, and then we'll put you on track with who can help you.
So who's the person to call? The person who's going through it, or the person they're calling? Because like you said,
the person
really
who's the
harassing
subject
both
of it.
people.
Right.
They're harassing the one that owe and the one who is related to the person.
The person who's the subject of the debt should really make the complaint. And they can notify either the Department of Financial Services, or if it's my office or whoever their local elected official is, who in their family has been harassed, whether it's or maybe their office, if they call their workplace. Collect as much information as possible. It makes the case against that person a lot stronger.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. Call your office or call the Senate for Brooklyn?
Call whoever your elected official is, or whoever their elected official is. If I happen to be it, call me. If it's Senator Montgomery, you would call her office.
You can call the Borough
President's
office as well, and we can direct you to the Constituent Assistance Center and log that complaint.
Okay. Call to the Borough office?
718-802-3700. So call the Constituent Assistance Center, and they'll be able to log that and reach out to the people that need to be reached out to.
Okay, thank you.
Erica Dukmanovich?
She's from the bank.
From the bank.
It's Dukhanovic. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having us here today in the evening. My name is Erika Dukhanovic, and I'm representing the Bali National Bank. I'm a territory manager, vice president of the Bensonhurst area in Brooklyn.
You said Valley National Bank.
I am very pleased to hear what I hear, for one reason. Valley National Bank, I'm joined Valley National Bank for 7 years. In that time, I personally conducted several financial literacy in high school in Brooklyn, in public schools. Being said that, I would like to let you know that I was very, very pleased with kids of the age from 13 to 16 years old. They ask questions, even as sometimes we say silly questions, which are really very important, and I was very pleased to see the outcome of that financial literacy. Teach them how to fill up the checks. They had no idea. How to talk to their parents about saving money. How to come to see us to open the account for children. The bank is offering nice award for kids. You open savings account, custodian for kids. You received $20 deposit. For one reason, teach children how to save money. Another subject, what we were educating high school kids, was how to build a credit report. How is important to build a credit report. And I give them my own example. When I came to United States, I didn't know the rules how to build a credit report. And I learned, I bought a house, I raised 2 kids by myself, and I learned the whole, how to build your credit. It's really very important to educate the kids. So I'm very, very pleased to let you know that we already educating the kids in Brooklyn in high school, elementary high school, and the high school in Brooklyn.
That's very good.
So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to see us outside and teach you. By the way, also, I would like to mention about the seniors. We're doing fraud classes also, educating them, coming to senior homes in our neighborhoods, in Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan. So we're more than welcome if anyone is interested, so we can come over and educate them about the fraud. It's very, very important.
Very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Erica. Appreciate it.
I know who to call to do financial literacy training.
Excuse me.
I still don't know who to call to do financial literacy training.
Good business move. Moving along, Catherine Sutherall.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Sutherall. I'm from Brooklyn, in Canarsie. I want to commend everybody here and the Borough President's
Can you speak into the microphone?
Can you hear
Thank
me?
Thank you very much.
I want to commend everybody here and the Borough President's office for pushing financial literacy, but I think it's okay. Thank you. But I think it's imperative to understand that we need, for the diverse population of Brooklyn, we need diverse types of financial literacy, because not everybody is entering into the financial world at the same point. On the topic of the resources that are available, many times, even down to legal services, the people who need these services are working. So we have to think about how we can get those resources to people, not just at the times that it's suitable to come maybe to the Borough President's office or even at the libraries, where there's a lot of information available. One of the things that prevents people from making good financial decisions is many times we don't know our rights. And speaking to what Elizabeth had said earlier on, I was somebody who had a different type of financial behavior until I came into a difficult financial situation. So I want to speak right now on the behalf of people who are homeowners. We know that the Attorney General, amongst others, have gone after many of the major banks, and that we've read in the papers that they've been fined billions. We don't really know what's happened to the billions. And I think we know that banks were bailed out using our tax dollars, but many of us as homeowners, we are struggling to get these same banks to assist us with our mortgage rates. Time and time again, we are told that, you know, well, when you signed, you closed at 6.75%. We can see that the mortgage rates have dropped, and we are not being allowed, for whatever reason, to access these lower mortgage rates. On top of that, things have changed. There are a lot of factors that affect homeowners that are without our control. Utilities. You know, utilities are rising all the time. We have no control over that. And then different types of homeowners, whether you live in you're living a single-family home, a two-family home, a co-op, or a condo. There are rules that prevent you from going out and doing things on your own to try to better your financial situation. So my two questions are, one, are we ever going to be able to find a situation where the banks actually help homeowners? And two, for people who are struggling with utilities, if you have to decide to pay your Con Ed bill as opposed to what you can buy to feed your children, what are you going to do? Because Con Edison will come, as we've seen where we live, and cut off your electricity and demand $500, $1,000 in payment immediately, otherwise they're going to cut your electricity. And these people are seniors and they have children. We need help. Thank you.
Thank you for the two questions. With respect to the banking settlements, it's about $5 billion between the various banks, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of New York, Citibank, and BNP. BNP. It's roughly about $5.5 billion that was paid to the state of New York. The settlements talk about the money can be used for things like supporting affordable housing and pretty much anything else. The bulk of the money is gone into restructuring some of our infrastructure. A lot of it is going, though, into propping up some of our affordable housing programs. $100 million is going to go into the New York City Housing Authority, which desperately needs it. There's money that's going into creating what's called Mitchell-Lama 2020. Mitchell-Lama is the only successful housing program the state of New York has ever actually run. When you look at the conditions of NYCHA and you compare that to the conditions of most of the Mitchell-Lamas, you see the big difference. But not all of the money is going into housing. It's a challenge for us to deal with the banks. Remember, as I said, most of the banks are federally chartered, so there's a limit to what we can do. Why banks wouldn't allow you to refinance is a question I can't answer. I think those are the individual cases that if you want to get them to my office, we can try and help you with them. But all things being equal, if you got a mortgage when it was 6% and the mortgage rates are now at 4%, there shouldn't be any impediment to refinancing. There are costs associated with refinancing, though, as people know. There is a bigger problem, I believe, though, that when people bought the houses, they are now what they call underwater in their mortgages. Their houses are not worth what they paid for. And so you're going to run into a problem when that refinance. You could hold on to the house long enough, hopefully it'll appreciate in value, but I think the peak of 2008, I don't think we're ever going to see that again.
But never, but
yeah, in terms of home prices. That may very well be one of the reasons why they're not allowing refinancing. But again, individual cases, we can help. It's hard to answer these questions in a broad way because there usually are extenuating circumstances with each application. Con Ed's a whole other issue. Con Ed is not supposed to turn off the electricity for people who are seniors. They are certainly not supposed to turn off electricity in a home where there are small children. If that happens, we can immediately put a stop to that. But if a person has a huge debt to Con Edison, they're going to have to pay it. Now, we may be able to help them negotiate a payment plan, but at some point they're going to have to pay it. I think we run into problems sometimes with people who are renters in someone else's property, and it's the landlord that actually owes Con Ed, and the renter winds up being, deprived of the electricity, and those are a little bit more complicated. But again, if there are individual situations, those you should bring to any of us in elected office. We should be able to help you with that.
Great. Thank you, Senator Savino. That was the last testimony slip. I think, oh, okay. Bring it up and feel free to.
Sure.
Sure. Thank you very much. Okay, sure, that's fine. This is Barbara Simmons. Okay, thank you,
Are
Barbara.
you a teacher, Barbara?
I'm board certified parent consultant.
Look at that. I said if she was a teacher, because she's got a lot of teaching buttons.
She's at all our rallies, I know her.
Hi, good evening. I'm not a talker, I'm a doer.
Can you I'm sorry, Barbara, can you just pick up the microphone to?
Okay. Hi,
Thank you.
good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm not a talker, I'm just a doer. I'm 15-year cancer survivor with 48 hours to live. But I do the best I can for my community and my children. I don't do too much for myself. But something occurred this week. I don't know if this is the place to talk about it. I co-signed for someone for $3,000. I never co-signed before. I'm a community activist. I live in Crown Heights for 40 years. I co-signed for someone last year. I never did it before. I just found out this week, last week, Friday, whatever, that they do $509 this month, and that I had to pay $375 to come out of collection, which took 48 to 24 hours. I wasn't aware what I did. I called the bank, and I told them that I was the co-signer, but that's my fault because I'm with Bankers Trust, and I pay $12.99 a month. So it should teach me a lesson and everybody else. They give me my credit report, but I'm so busy taking care of the people, I wasn't checking that report that came in. Make a short story short. I found out from October, November, December, January, February. Well, anyway, the last payment was made, I believe, in October. They were paying by check. Then they put it into their Nexum account, and for some apparent reason, Nexel, they paid $688 in April, right? What I did was it was $92 a month. I had the person give me that $92 a month. When I got my Social Security, I put the balance just to get myself out of debt, because it was $503. I just wanted to get out of the collection at $375. So now the 10th is coming up. They tell me they have to pay the balance. I tell them, check this out. I'm concerned about getting out of collection. I never had no problem on my credit report. And so what I did was I looked at the Privacy Act from my bank. I seen it. So it's my fault. You know, it's really my fault. Mm-hmm. So what I told them, I said, once I come out of collection, I had the person contact Nexel, and I told them I want to see in writing what went wrong, why you didn't pay this you know, you had the money coming in because he gets Social Security. I want to see what happened. So they said that they're going to send it to the bank. No, you're not sending it to the bank. You're going to send it to me. I want to see. So how could you help me?
I'm not sure who, see,
I co-signed.
You co-signed a loan for.
I co-signed a loan for somebody to get something.
Okay, and that person didn't make the payments on the loan?
Well, what they did, they are telling me that they made the payment on the loan, right, by check. So they switch it over for Nexel to take the money out. So and this is all I can tell you, you know, because right now I'm upset, and I know when I get upset, I get stressed out as a cancer survivor.
I'm not, you actually need to sit down with somebody. Yeah.
Okay.
You need to bring whatever documents you have, whatever paperwork, and if you have a copy of the original loan agreement that you co-signed, that would be
Yes.
helpful.
Well, what I was gonna do myself, I got, it only take common sense. I know common sense is not common no more. I figure I can do it on my own.
Yeah, you can't. And don't co-sign loans for people anymore unless they're blood. Even then, think about it twice, okay? That's right.
So that's,
It's one of the ways people get themselves jammed up. Listen, we've all been there. We've all done that, And that's why you have to read the fine print and everything you sign.
But what I wanted to ask you, I got the account from the person, they said I can have your account, you giving me your account. And you giving me Nexus. I'm in volunteer in summer school right now. We're doing 10 tours to colleges. I'm on Friday morning. I'm gonna be on that phone, we're gonna do a three-way. Because the person who I took co-sign for, couldn't explain to me what happened. Something happened with Nexo, so I want an explanation. So before I talk to her and deal with her, I'm gonna get to the root of the thing myself, because they're gonna tell me what happened that you had a delay of payment, take money out of his account for $688. And then I'm upset with the person because they didn't tell me, but I'm more upset with myself. Because if I get a credit report every month, when you pay a $12.99 Privacy Act, I didn't look at it. So now I have to go all the way back to October and open these envelopes and follow the trail, so. That's all I had to say.
Good luck.
Thank you, Barbara, and please connect with.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamil, you had one last thing to say?
Hi. Going back to 2008 with the subprime crisis, right? Now, it was the banking industry that created this product, right? That gave people money so that they can make a fee. Correct me if I'm wrong as I explain what I understand, right? So they created the product, now created the crisis, and the U.S. taxpayer bailed out the banking industry. And what do? They pay, Wall Street pays bonuses to these industry experts, quote unquote, right? Now, people that have homes that have gotten affected and foreclosed on, right? I know a few of these people that have lost their homes, right? Where is the bailout for the taxpayers that did nothing but take a loan that the banking greed created? That's number one. And my second question is that a few years ago, because I'm a member of the African American community here, and we get redlined, and I'm not naive to think that bankers are really going to show people how to save money because they're in a capitalist society here to make money, right? So this whole financial literacy program coming from the banks is sort of like, kind of naive, okay? Well, we can talk about it afterwards. But I want to know specifically, Corcoran, which is, I believe, the largest residential real estate realtor in New York City, had gotten written up in the paper a few years back, and they got caught redlining the black community. They actually had a map that was targeting, and they were telling black folks that wanted to buy in a certain area that they would steer them into another area. Now I have the article. So I need to know how did they get punished? Because I see them thriving and they still are giving and raising, and gentrification is alive and well in Brooklyn. I believe we're the fastest growing gentrified community in the nation. So those two questions, if you can answer that.
I don't know what happened to Corcoran. I'm assuming there must have been some fine levied against them. That would be the penalty that would be imposed by the Fed. What do we do with the?
Yeah, the fines are levied against the.
And they're paid towards the agency that levies the fines. But we know that they got caught because you read about it in the paper. So they got caught, they tried to do it, and they got away with it. I think that's not really the subject of tonight's hearing. We could probably do a whole other hearing on the real estate industry and the effects it's having on gentrifying communities, which is only going to continue, as we know.
Speaking of which, we're having tenant harassment hearings next Tuesday
Right.
here at Borough Hall at 6 p.m.
But subprime lending has a place in all aspects of financial services. It was utilized in a way that it was never intended for. It's supposed to be used, and correct me if I'm wrong, for investors, for people to maintain liquidity in transactions, or for people who have bad credit. That's the reality in this world. If you have bad credit, and that's why managing your finances and understanding credit is so critically important, because if you have bad credit, you are going to pay more for everything. That's just the reality, because you're a greater risk to the bank. The bank's got to make good on that loan too. I give you a 30-year loan, and you don't pay your bills on a monthly basis, but I want to give you that loan anyway, you're going to pay a higher interest rate than she does if she pays her bills every month on time. That's life. So the best thing you can do to avoid that is to maintain a good credit rating. What happened with the subprime lending crisis, though, for the residential homeowner is they were given loans that they could never afford to begin with. And they were given a loan that was packaged in a way that was manipulated. So they would sit down with people and they would say, Patrick, how much is your rent in your apartment in Bay Ridge? I pay $1,000 a month. Right. I'm going to put you in a $1,000 a month mortgage for that $500,000 a year house. It's impossible. But I can do it in a short period of time, for 18 months, and then we're going to have this thing called a balloon payment, and it's going to refinance. And everybody goes, all you know is your monthly payment's $1,000 a month. I can afford that. I'm taking that house. That led to a disaster. No, it wasn't criminal. It wasn't criminal.
Yeah, it's incumbent upon the people, the signer to read the documents. I mean, that's one of the challenges why we have to have financial literacy and financial education to make those good decisions. And that's why we were here tonight, to kind of identify ways that we can educate people and potentially legislate those types of things out of reality. Patrick, sorry.
Yeah. So the fact of the matter is that with the subprime crisis, there was more than enough blame to go around. Pretty much everybody lost their minds, okay? There was a way for the banks to lend the money and then get it off their balance sheets because we created securities that they could sell to the rest of the world. So that opened up the floodgates, and then unscrupulous actors came up with really bad products for consumers. But the consumers also bought into this wholeheartedly. They didn't practice what I mentioned earlier, which is if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So greed took root in all facets of this entire chain of events. People were getting way more house than they knew they could afford, and they were kind of turning a blind eye. There was a way for the banks to get them out there and get them off their books, and everybody in the meantime was making a whole lot of money. So it's usually like, I remember reading something about a study of accidents, car accidents, airplane accidents. There's almost always more than one thing that goes wrong. There's one mistake here, and then there's a fail-safe that doesn't do its job, or a second mistake is almost always made. And that's really evident in what happened with the subprime crisis. Everybody did the wrong thing, both the borrowers, the lenders, and the investment bankers who were able to move this stuff off their balance sheets very quickly.
Yeah, but the banks got bailed out. Why didn't the people get a guarantee that they were going to get their loans modified?
Well, some did. There were a significant number of people that did. That's the Obama administration created the HARP program, the Homeowner Assistance Refinance Program. So some people did get help. Some people were able to sit down and modify their mortgages. One of the things we did here in New York State, we actually enacted the most comprehensive foreclosure prevention law in the country. Even the federal government doesn't have as tight a rule. We require banks to enter into what they call settlement conferences with homeowners to kind of prevent the foreclosure process. But some homes can't be saved. It's just the reality. Some people are too far underwater. They never should have been granted a loan to begin with. And you can't do it. But to those who could, you can. We've encouraged And in some instances, banks have what they call written down the loan, you know, to make it manageable, but each case is individual.
Great. Sorry, ma'am.
I have a question about public utilities
Mhm.
and what you could possibly do to legislate. For example, National Grid charges you money for them sending out the bill, which you're paying. If you look at the rest of your statement, Verizon does the same thing, is $20 to $30 extra payment on the public utilities.
That's why. That's it. I'm going to plug my own legislation. AARP has been pushing this for 2 years, and we can't get it out of the legislature. We need a utility consumer advocate, because everybody has a voice at the Public Service Commission. Utility companies do, the state does, but the people don't. So next year, I need you all to help me get the Utility Consumer Advocate Bill passed. They have it in 43 other states, and you have an individual who is able to fight the fight. And in all those states, we've seen them be able to bring down the expenses and the monthly costs. And whenever there's a utility rate increase, because right now they have what's called file and serve. So all the utility companies have to do with the Public Service Commission is file a notice that they want to raise rates, and they can do it. It's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. And then they come up with, you know, every month I get my Time Warner cable bill keeps going up every month. I don't know why. I call them up and I say, why is it $6 more this month? And they said, well, it's no, I didn't do anything. Why am I paying more? That's right. No, it's wrong.
But,
It's nickel and diming of people, you're right.
Thank you. Next hearing.
On my soapbox now.
I wanted to say thank you on behalf of Borough President Eric Adams and the Deputy Borough President, Diane Arena, to Senator Savino, who was a great honor to have her here, chair of the Banking Committee, and also to Patrick Gilbride from Edward Jones. This is really, just give him a round of applause. Thank you. The wealth of knowledge up here is incredible. And of course, wanted to say thank you to all of you who came here tonight, the partner organizations that came here as well, and particularly to Candace and Mike in the back for their help in getting people out. We are going to be compiling all the comments that we had here today, and hopefully by the end of the summer issuing a report with some recommendations that can help expand financial education, financial literacy, and improve creditworthiness in Brooklyn. So thanks again for coming out on behalf of the Borough President, and have a great night. Thank you.